Hello and welcome back to our Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky 1 playthrough. In our last episode, we investigated the ambush of Matron Teresa and Kana. See something anyway. We investigated the ambush of Matron Teresa and her orphanage kids, and the subsequent stealing of her money. We found out that it was the mayor of Ruan, eventually, that was the one who was responsible, and that he too had lost his memory, like the Sky Pirates boss had in the end of the previous chapter. We are about to leave the Ruan region. We've been told to go to Zeiss to investigate an orbment that our father was given, and that we opened the package of and used subsequently. Though we don't know how we used it, but it saved us in the last episode from being banished in time. So we're going to investigate that in the land of Zeiss, which is apparently Orbment Geek Heaven. So yes, we're about to do that. Let's carry on. Black-clad man 1 is out of breath. Stubborn bastard. Agate is chasing after these black-clad people. I can't read that fast enough, so I'm sorry. Black-clad man 2 says, "Damn, we can't shake him." Black-clad man 1 says, "We have no choice. Time to counterattack." Agate says, "I guess you're finally taking me seriously." "Good. I was getting sick of playing tag with you fools." Black-clad man says he's not going to give up until he's dead. Black-clad man 2 says, "What a stubborn idiot. Does he really think he can beat 2-to-1 odds?" Agate laughs. "I think I already have." Black-clad man asks, "What?" That's Black-clad man 1. Agate says, "Every fight takes spirit. You lose that, you've lost everything. And I figured out exactly what kind of spirit you losers had when you took off with your tails between your legs." Black-clad man 1 says, "Silence, Gilder Dog." Black-clad man 2 says, "We can handle you. You're in for a painful death." Redhead Cloud just does a limit break. Black-clad man 1 gasps in horror. Black-clad man 2 says, "Damn it, we can't get caught now." Agate says, "Okay, how about you just surrender and give me your full confessions, starting with who you are and what you're after." A man's voice says, "You needn't concern yourself about that." Agate asks, "What?" "When did you get here?" Black-clad man 1 says, "Commander." Black-clad man 2 says, "You came for us." The masked commander says, "You two are pitiful. You failed to report in as appointed, and this is why." Black-clad man 1 says, "We have no excuses." Black-clad man 2 says, "We've had a lot of interference." Agate says, "I get it. So you're the man in charge?" The masked commander laughs. "Only of this particular scene. Allow me to apologize on behalf of my men. Could I persuade you to overlook this incident?" Agate asks, "Huh?" "Okay, repeat that." The masked commander says, "I said that I'd like for you to overlook this incident. We never had any intention of running afoul of the Bracers Guild." Agate says, "Don't make me laugh. You think I'm just going to look the other way and let you get away with what you did?" The masked commander says, "Ah, well, I had thought it a generous offer personally, certainly a fairer price than death. Both of you, stand down. Return to the rendezvous point at once. Black-clad man 1 says, "Yes, sir." Black-clad man 2 says, "Thank you, Commander." And off they run. Agate shouts, "Where do you think you're going?" Son of a... Fine. The target may have changed, but as long as I have one, and you being the leader, I assume you've got better information to offer me than your underlings anyway. The Master Commander laughs. You think it'll be that easy to make me talk? Agate says, I sure as hell intend to find out. Agate says, not bad at all. The Master Commander says, you have an irrepressible passion, but a great weight bears down upon you. You are not quite so different from me. Agate asks, what did you just say? Master Commander says, it's a painful thing to be powerless in a time of crisis. But you know that feeling all too well, no? I can see it in your eyes. Agate laughs. Fine then. I don't know who you are, but I think I like you. The Master Commander says, there is no shame in powerlessness. There is no shame in being outmatched. You and I both know that. Perhaps we could come to a mutually beneficial arrangement. Agate screams, screw you! Don't act like you know anything about me. You're in for one hell of a beatdown. The Master Commander laughs. Everybody was kung fu fighting. The Master Commander says, gah, you mean you lost? Agate chuckles. All talk, no shock. Bet the guild's going to love interrogating you. What the? Okay, so the Master Commander just disappeared. Agate says, is that the body split craft? Agate sensed something faint from the dark forest beyond. And a man's voice starts laughing. Nice try, but you've got a heavy heart. And a heavy heart makes for a light blade. Agate asks, why didn't you come out from hiding and say that? The Master Commander's voice says, when a warrior enters a skirmish, he must be prepared to lose everything. Otherwise he can gain nothing. In order to live as a man, you must forego all anger and grief. With that, I bid you farewell. The presence in the trees seems to have vanished. Agate stammers, forego? How the hell am I supposed to do that? Chapter 3, The Black Orbment. And we are on the north side of Ruan with Estelle and Joshua. Estelle says, guess she's not here yet. Did we get here that early? Joshua says, could be. Want to kill some time at the tavern? Estelle says, nah, it's nice out, so I think I'd rather just wait here. I doubt I could ever get tired of the view of the river. Joshua says, yeah, no kidding. Estelle says, I even get the feeling that Ruan's finally back to normal. Pretty amazing considering the uproar after Mayor Dalmore's arrest. Joshua says, well, a seated mayor has never been arrested before. Try to imagine if Mayor Klaus was arrested in Rolent. Estelle says, yeah, that would be a real shock. But when I think of it that way, the people of Ruan almost seem cold. I mean, they were clearly surprised by what happened, but not a single person was truly shocked, far as I can tell. Joshua says, well, you have to remember, the mayor of Ruan has always been selected by bloodline alone. He wasn't elected to his position by the Ruanians, and that probably makes all the difference in the world. Estelle says, yeah, that's true. The people of Roland appointed Klaus mayor because they liked him and trusted him. Dalmore's getting what he deserves, but I still feel kind of bad for him. Joshua says, hey, look who's here. Estelle says, huh? Oh, Zieg. Zieg screeches. A girl's voice calls out, Estelle, Joshua. Chloe puffs and pants. Hey, I'm sorry that I'm late. Joshua says, no problem, we just got here ourselves. Estelle says, don't tell us you ran all the way here. You really didn't need to rush. Chloe says, I couldn't let you two go without seeing you off. Thank you very much for contacting me. Estelle says, Chloe, I keep telling you, you don't have to thank us. You too, Zieg, thank you for coming. Zieg screeches. Joshua laughs. Well then, shall we be off? Estelle says, okay. We need to use the south exit to reach Zeiss, right? Chloe nods. Yes, on the southern road is the checkpoint called Erlitten. And set out for Zeiss from there. Estelle says, roger that. Okay, let's go. Zieg screeches. Again. And south we go. And I turned the wrong way. I turned the wrong way. That's the mayor's residence. So we just go down here. Oh, we got him. Ow.
All right, we're good to go.
Some tender poultry. Yummy. Erlitten is this way. Help! Alright. Let us try Cloak and Dagger on the emu. See what it does. Not much. It'd be nice to see what Comet does next time. I know the emu's gone.
That's that then. Let's move out.
Two azalea fruit, bird egg. Still got quite a few dishes. We don't know. Estelle says, I've been here before, but this is a nice little spot. The view here is breathtaking. Certainly doesn't feel like a checkpoint, that's for sure. Chloe says, actually, I hear that a lot from visitors. Actually, I hear that a lot of visitors come here to see the waterfall. Estelle says, really? Ruan sure has a lot of nice places, huh? I can understand why the Duke would want to live here. Chloe says, agreed. But I think Relent is also a nice, relaxing place to live. Estelle asks, oh, you've been to Relent? Chloe nods. Yes, I've been to all 5 of the great cities. Oh, that's right, Zeiss is up ahead. You'll be surprised how charming it is. Estelle asks, really? Sounds like we're in for some fun. Joshua says, all right, why don't we get the paperwork started then? Estelle nods. Okay. Yay, paperwork. Paperwork. I'm so very excited. Private Vernon says, hey, welcome to the Airleton checkpoint. If you want to get set up to go through, head to the counter inside. Private Cromwell says, good afternoon. How may I be of assistance? Joshua says, we were wondering what had to be done to obtain permission to enter Zeiss. Private Cromwell says, okay then, step right up. I'll take care of you. Be aware though that once these procedures have begun that you'll not be allowed to leave the checkpoint. Are you okay with that? Yes we are. Estelle says, yeah, go ahead please. Private Cromwell says, then please start by signing these documents. Estelle and Joshua signed their names to the documents. Alright, everything looks to be in order. Is the young lady there not joining you? Chloe says, "Oh, I only came to see them off." Private Cromwell says, "Ah, very well then. You'll be able to accompany them as far as the mouth of the Caldia Tunnel." Chloe says, "Thank you very much." Estelle asks, "What's the Caldia Tunnel?" Private Cromwell answers, "It is the main road that joins this checkpoint to Zeiss. The path is a long tunnel that passes directly through Caldia Hill." Estelle says, "Wow, an underground road." Joshua says, "That'll definitely be a first for me too." Estelle says, "Wow, this is amazing." So the waterfall comes from a man-made river. Joshua says, "I think it's called the Lolly Waterway. It was made a very long time ago." Chloe says, "Yes, and it's linked directly to the Valeria Lakeshore." Estelle says, "Pretty impressive, given that they did it without any Orbments to help." "So what's that over there?" Joshua says, "That's the entrance to the tunnel, I think." Estelle nods, "Yeah." "So I guess this is goodbye." Chloe says, "Yes. So you're going to be travelling around the kingdom, right? We might be able to meet again in Gransel." Estelle asks, "Really?" Chloe says, "I'll be going back there when the Queen's birthday celebration starts. Some of my relatives will be there, so I have to join them." Joshua says, "That's just a month away, isn't it? I think we may actually be in Gransel around that time." Estelle says, "So then, once you're done with your family stuff, contact the Gransel Guild branch. If you do, we can try to meet up." Chloe says, "I certainly will. Estelle and Joshua, I can't thank you enough. I won't ever forget everything that you've done for me." Estelle says, "Come on, don't be so formal." Joshua says, "We're in your debt as well, for many reasons. I'd say we're pretty even." Chloe says, "What a thing to say. When we confronted the mayor, I said some terrible things. You care for no one but yourself, but I was no different." Estelle says, "Huh?" Chloe says, "I've been running away from the reality of my own situation for a while now, to the orphanage and to the academy, but the two of you taught me something. You helped me find the courage to hold my head high, and find the strength to protect what matters. Because of you, I know how to be brave." Estelle says, I don't really get it, but if we're able to help you, I'm happy." Chloe says, "Oh." Estelle laughs. "Cheer up, okay? We'll see each other again in Gransel." Chloe says, "Yes, absolutely." Zieg screeches. Estelle says, "Ha! And maybe we'll get to see Zieg there too, right?" Zieg screeches again. Estelle says, "That was a joke. I mean, Gransel's pretty far away. I don't think those wings would hold. Besides, your home is here." Zieg screeches again. Chloe laughs. "Zieg isn't just any bird, you know. I think he'll be there." Estelle says, "I'm sure." Joshua laughs. "Zieg's just full of surprises, isn't he? Well then, shall we be off?" Estelle says, "Yeah." Chloe says, "Hey, good luck to both of you on your journey, and I'll be praying for you to find your father." Zieg screeches yet again. Estelle says, "Thank you." Joshua says, "You two take care." Chloe looks off into middle distance. Zeke screeches yet again. Chloe says, "Yes, I think so too. We'll see them again." A woman's voice says, "Sorry to keep you waiting, Chloe." Chloe says, "Miss Julia, you're done with your duties at Leiston Fortress?" First Lieutenant Schwartz says, "Yes, it took longer than I had anticipated. Pardon my rudeness, but I've come to get your report on the incident." Chloe says, "Thank you for your service." Zeke screeches yet again and flies around First Lieutenant Schwartz. First Lieutenant Schwartz says, "Hey now, settle down, Zeke. Have you been fulfilling your duty as escort?" Zeke screeches. Chloe laughs. "He's always been very helpful." "Isn't that right, Zeke?" Zeke screeches. First Lieutenant Schwartz says, "He's certainly chipper." First Lieutenant Schwartz says, "The sailor is stopped at the end of the highway. You're to report in there." Chloe says, "Understood. I'll be leaving school for a while. I need to say goodbye to my teachers before returning to Gransel." Chloe whispers to herself, "Estelle, Joshua, I'll take what you taught me and show you that I can be strong. Stronger than even you two. I'll do everything in my power to see to that." And we are in the Caldia Tunnel. Estelle asks, "What's wrong?" Joshua says, "Nothing. I just got the feeling that someone was coming." Estelle says, "Someone in here other than us?" Guess not." Joshua says, "Yeah. Sorry, must have imagined it." Estelle says, "Oh, I get it. I think you've still got a little crush on Chloe." Joshua says, "Huh? What makes you say that?" Estelle grins. "Oh, don't be shy. You know I can read you like a book. It's not unreasonable after all. You did kiss her during the play? What if she asked you to come back? You'd say yes, right?" Joshua says, "I guess you didn't notice then." Estelle asks, "Notice what?" Joshua says, "The last scene. That was just for show, you know. It was staged, just so it would look like a real kiss for the audience." Estelle has nothing to say. Then she asks, "What?" Joshua says, "You can be completely clueless sometimes. It was written right there in the script notes." Estelle laughs nervously. "I see." Estelle whispers to herself, "Note to self, do not insert foot into mouth. But why do I feel so relieved?" Joshua asks, "Estelle, you okay?" Estelle laughs. "I'm fine. Come on, Zeiss awaits." "Well, to Zeiss we go then." "Oh. Aren't you a lovely little jet tortoise?" "It has 800 HP. It is slightly weak to wind, and it can drop a monster carapace. A reptilian monster that likes warm places, uses earth-based arts, weak against wind." Airstrike for you. And I don't have anything wind-based. Okay. Let's go exploring. A damp crawler. It has 650 HP. It has no particular elemental weakness. It can drop a leathery tail and a lucky fang. A lava monster living in the darkness spews sticky fluid to weaken its prey. As you do. Pink gummy juice. Delightful.
Piece of cake.
We found a curio bar. The chest is empty because you removed the contents, you looter. And a Tira bomb. Nope, still empty. Well... And we found another Tira bomb. The chest is empty, like your thieving heart. Ouch. I don't have a thieving heart, do I? Aren't you the most delightful fish? A cave ray. It has 580 HP. It is weak to both fire and wind. It can drop a fish fillet and a fish egg. A monster living in the dank underground, fast and armed with poisonous fins. I see. Ow.
All right, we're good to go.
We receive a Death Blow 2 materia. Reduced to searching empty chests. That's really sad. A Bubble Blower. It has 780 HP. It is slightly weak to fire and wind. It can drop a monster carapace and a juicy bone. A crustacean monster living in the darkness breathes hypnotic bubbles. As you do. Those are some nice bubbles.
All right, we're good to go.
And we got a juicy bone. Oh, well, he's gone.
Here I come!
Wind. Not arts. Please don't use arts, Jet Tortoise.
Piece of cake!
Really? Really? Help! Ew, gummy juice.
All right! We rule!
Now, conventional wisdom states, as soon as you rest, save. Because there's usually a point for having a rest point somewhere. Okay, airstrike on the Jet Tortoise. Brim, yes.
All right, we're good to go.
We got a juicy bone. He's a big old slow-moving turtle, and we still can't hit him. Ow. Ooh.
Piece of cake.
Let's do this!
Here I come.
All right, we're good to go.
Now, what could be around these next corners?
Take! Take!
Hmm.
Take!
Ew.
That's that then. Let's move out.
Ooh, a monster carapace. Give us.
Take! Take! Take!
Well, there's a lot of stuff happening to Estelle, isn't there?
All right, we rule.
Joshua's leveled up to level 20. We found a tear balm. The chest is empty, but you may now fill it with your tears. Wow. We found a celestial balm. Aha, you're gay.
We're good to go.
And Estelle is now level 20 as well. And we received a fish egg. Let's put another airstrike into you. And you should be done. You are done.
That's that then. Let's move out.
Very nice, very nice. A voice from seemingly far away is panting. I've got to hurry. Estelle says, huh? Joshua says, someone's coming this way. A girl says, oh. Joshua says, good afternoon. Estelle asks, where's the fire? The girl says, good afternoon. Are you taking this road too? Estelle says, well, yeah. The girl asks, have you seen any lights that weren't working? The lights along the tunnel wall, I mean. Sorry about the break. Estelle says, sorry. If there are, I haven't noticed any. Joshua says, all of the lights we passed were still on. We did pass one that was flickering. There's 2 rivers between it and here. The girl says, that's it. It's just like I thought. Sorry, I have to hurry. And off she runs. Joshua says, I wonder if she's from Zeiss. Strange little kid. She seemed awfully flustered. Estelle says, now I'm kind of worried. Hey, you want to try following her? Joshua says, you read my mind. I don't like the idea of a little girl wandering around here by herself. We should catch up to her and stick close. Estelle says, okay, come on, let's hurry. I guess we're going all the way back then. North, limestone cave. Warning, beware of monsters. Must assume that is a quest donation. Location. Girl's eyes. That's probably a problem. The girl says, I can't believe there are so many of them. It's going to break at this rate. Maybe there's... Bearing set, angle of elevation 20 degrees, orbital compression at 30%. Go! It's a bazooka! The girl cries, if you come any closer, then I won't miss next time. I mean it. And the monsters are just like, yeah, okay. The girl says, oops, I think that might have made them angrier. Estelle and Joshua leap to her defense. The girl says, huh? Hey, I remember you. Estelle says, we can talk later. Get back. Joshua says, we've got to get rid of these things first. Alright, now, we're going to see what Comet actually does. Okay. It's a Hadouken. Right, we'll use a stone impact on those three. And they're probably not overly impressed. You don't have to spit your goo on me all the time. Could you spit it on someone else? Do you know how long it takes to get that stuff out of her hair?
Scary.
Very nice. We received a leathery tail and a lucky fang. The girl says, that was scary. Thank you very much. I thought I was a goner for sure. Estelle laughs. Well, the important thing is that you're safe. But you really should be more careful. Stirring up monsters is a surefire way to get yourself eaten. The girl says, but if I'd left them alone, they probably would have broken that light. Estelle says, speaking of which, why would these things go after the lights anyway? Joshua says, the septium in those circuits is the monster's favourite food. The highway lights work to keep monsters away, but when they stop working, they have the exact opposite effect. Estelle says, I get it. Still, you shouldn't mess with stuff like that. Septium might be their favourite food, but little girls probably rank a close second. The girl says, oh, sorry. Joshua says, go easy there. Giving you nightmares and saying don't do that isn't exactly going to score you any points. Estelle pouts, oh, don't be such a wet blanket. Anyway, my name's Estelle. Joshua says, and I'm Joshua. We're braces affiliated with the guild. The girl says, oh, so that's why you're so tough. I'm Tita. I work as an apprentice at the central factory. Estelle says, wow, that's pretty impressive. Well then, Tita, we're heading to Zeiss, so do you want to join us the rest of the way? Joshua says, that's right, you don't want to be around here if the monsters show up again. Tita says, really? Thank you. Would you mind waiting for a little bit? I've got to get that light fixed. Estelle says, yeah, it's probably risky to leave it like that. How in the world did you know it had burned out, though? Tita says, well, I was lucky enough to notice the problem when I was looking in the computer database. It seems like a defective unit was installed here by mistake. Joshua says, all right. It's a good thing you caught it when you did. Estelle whispers, computer? Database? Tita says, oomph. Okay, that should do it. Sorry it took so long. Estelle says, wow, colour me impressed. Joshua says, well, if she's an apprentice at the central factory, she has to be good. Tita laughs. Well, I didn't do anything special. I just fixed the quartz connection and adjusted the orbal pressure. Estelle has no idea what she's talking about. Estelle says, well, it sure sounds special. Tita says, it's not that big a deal. Okay, how to explain this? Each orbment has a circuit quartz inside, and if that isn't properly connected, the orbal energy inside the unit will have nowhere to go. As a result, the orbment won't be able to function properly. This happens sometimes with highway lights, which means their ability to give out light and ward off monsters is compromised, so Estelle shouts, stop! Maybe you should save the explanation for after we get on the road. I mean, if we stand around too long, the monsters, you know. Tita says, yeah, I guess so. I was just warming up too. Estelle whispers, phew. Joshua laughs. Well, why don't we set out for Zeiss then? Estelle says, okay. Tita says, yes, sir. Well, we might have almost been there. But we turned around. Oops. Oops, didn't see you there. Probably should have. Ow! That was not nice.
That's that then. Let's move out.
We got a fish egg, and a leathery tail, and a lucky fang. Oh, look at that size through this way. Estelle says, "Oh, the tunnel ends here. So does this mean this is the entrance to Zeiss?" Tita says, "That's right. It leads right into the basement of the central factory." Estelle says, "I'm excited to see it." Joshua says, "The central factory is the pride and joy of Zeiss, since it's an industrial city. I've heard it was big, but that's about all I really know." Tita says, "Well, yeah, it's really huge. Anyone who's not used to the layout could get lost in a hurry." Estelle shivers. There's a creepy thought. I'm beginning to worry whether or not we'll really be able to make it to the guild. Tita says, "The way out to the city is up on the first floor. I'll show you how to get there." Estelle says, "Thanks." Joshua says, "Well, let's go in." Oh, what do you have to say for yourself? Rudy says, "Okay, that makes 8 cans. Check and double check. Let's check in on the factory." Are you sure that's 8? I can only see 6. Perhaps mathematics is not required for engineering. Who knows? Okay, so this is... Oh, it's a lift. Estelle says, "Okay, what's this room?" Tita says, "This is the elevator. It can take us from the basement to the roof." Estelle says, "Can't say I've ever seen one of these outside of the mines. And this one seems super high-tech." Joshua laughs. "Well, this is Zeiss. And since this is the central factory, I'm sure they have quite a few of these." Estelle asks, "They have more than one?" Tita laughs. "The latest model, too. Maximum weight capacity is 50 torim. It can handle even heavy industrial equipment with no problem." Estelle says, "I don't entirely get it, but it sure sounds impressive. So, how do we get it to move?" Tita says, "Oh, you just pick which floor you want on that panel. Let's see, you want to go into the city, right?" Joshua says, "Yes, can you take us up to the first floor?" Tita says, "Okay." And presses a button, and up we go. Estelle says, "Whoa, check out the size of this place." Tita says, "This is the central factory's main floor. It's where the reception desk and consumer maintenance windows are." Joshua says, "I see, so we can get out to town from here." Hazel says, "Oh, Tita." Tita says, "Miss Hazel?" Hazel says, "There you are. Supervisor Travis has been looking for you. He'd like for you to go straight to the operations room. Tita says, "Oh, okay, I will." He's going to turn you into a Dalek, dear. I probably wouldn't. Estelle says, "Uh-oh, sounds urgent." Joshua says, "Thank you for showing us around." Tita says, "It's no big deal. It's the least I can do after you beat up those monsters for me." Estelle says, "Well, we're planning to be inside for a little while. Would you mind if we stop by to see you again?" Tita says, I'd love that. Bye-bye then." And she goes back into the lift. Joshua laughs. What a sweet kid. I get the impression that she's a lot tougher than she looks. Estelle nods. I agree. I've always wanted a sweet, lovable little sister like her. Instead of, might I add, an obnoxious little brother. Joshua says, "You keep saying things like that, but you're the one who's always following me around. If you want to be more like a real older sister, you need to get your head out of the clouds every now and then." Estelle pouts. Look who's talking. Anyway, all sibling rivalries aside, want to head into the city? Joshua says, "Yeah. First I'd like to switch assignments at the guild. Plus we can see if there's any new information on the Orbment or Dad." Estelle says, "Sounds like a plan." Hazel says, "Welcome to the Zeiss Central Factory. If you have any questions, please let me know." Okay, and what do you do, sir? Eric says, "Welcome to maintenance. This may seem like just a service window, but we're a full part of the factory's Orbment division, as fully equipped as any shop. Please feel free to make full use of our facilities." Right, well, what do you have as far as quartz goes? 800. 800. 800. 800. I'll take an EP cut 2 or Estelle. And a defense 2 as well. So we're changing EP cut for EP cut 2. And a defense 1 for defense 2. Mind 1. There is a mind 2 for 300 blue ones. Oh, there's escalators and all. Priam says, "You look like you've been working hard. How about a nice cold drink?" Alright, well, what do you have? We know that, we know that, we know that, we know that, and we know that. Lovely. Irene says, "Welcome. I have all kinds of beautiful flowers. Please take a look." Vin says, "Mother, there are enough flowers on the veranda." Elise says, "Oh, look at these flowers. I'd love to plant these on the veranda, but I'm afraid the colours might clash." Oh, that's... yeah. pause. Estelle says, "Whoa, what's this?" Joshua says, "Some kind of moving staircase." It is a really long climb, so I guess it would be tough without it. Estelle says, "Yeah, but to have the whole thing moving underneath you? This place has been full of surprises ever since we got here." Joshua says, "No kidding." Well, I mean, you also haven't been here for a long time. And we are moving, look at that. Gary says, "That's incredible. A staircase that moves." Pretty much what we said, dude. Alright, so red's for the Braces Guild. Stain, Arms and Guards. Let's have a look what Stain has to offer. Ong says, decisions. Do I want a balanced general use weapon, or do I want an ace in the whole cannon? I ought to just buy both and stop wasting time worrying. I agree. Elkin says, "Greetings, weapon enthusiast. Welcome to Stain, Arms and Guards. Do the sight of fell accoutrements make your palms sweaty? Well, shop here. We cater to the violently inclined." Do you take mental stability into your calculations when you sell stuff? I wonder. Ow. Why does everything cost so much? Hang on. This metal jacket is plus 75, plus... okay. Oh, yes, you're not so good. Alright, we'll have to leave you there. Knowles says the balance is all off again. Maybe if I move that can on the left a little more. Okay. Elwyn says, "Come on in, welcome to Bell Station. We're the only store that carries everything from food to everyday goods." Alright, well, let's see your food and everyday goods. Orgle Bar. Randall says, home at last. Yeah, I just got back from a little trip to Ruan. I had a good time, but I sure am glad to be back at home. Well, good for you, chap. Ursus says, seems like this soup can help you concentrate, but I wonder if it really does anything. I mean, it's water, bouillon, vegetables and pepper. If you say so. Ben says, hello, haven't seen you all before, passing through. Well, come in and rest. What do you have? Rotini pasta, heals 600 HP and cures confusion. Might take one of you. Black pepper soup, heals 550 HP and cures faint. Seasonal tart. Heals 400 HP. Take one of you as well. Monica says, what do I do? Father told me to go buy bread. All this bread looks the same. Which one do I choose? If that's the problem, dear, you just choose whatever you feel like. Cosimo says, the memories. They helped Professor Russell build this Orbital clock. Orbment's drive it, you know. As long as the Orbital power doesn't stop, the clock will keep running. Not many remember the old days anymore when Zeiss was that clock town. Wasn't Professor R someone we were looking for? Anyway, let's go say hello. Estelle says, hi there. Joshua says, pardon us. Eastern woman. The Eastern woman says nothing. Estelle says, see where... The Eastern woman says, finally here, I see. Estelle, Joshua, welcome to Zeiss. Estelle says, huh? Joshua asks, you know us? The Eastern woman says, I've already been briefed of your arrival from one year. From one year. Yeah. From one year at the Ruan branch. Jean at the Ruan branch. A girl with chestnut hair tied in twin ponytails and a boy with black hair and amber eyes. That is you, is it not? Estelle says, okay. The Eastern woman says, my name is Kilika. Zeiss welcomes your services. Do you have a blitzball team out the back, perhaps? Anyone in need of sending? No? Kilika goes on, it's a pleasure to make your acquaintance. Estelle says, same here. Joshua says, the pleasure is ours. Kilika says, I know you've only just arrived, but I'd like to proceed with the formalities of changing our affiliation. If you'll just sign these documents. Estelle says, okay. Estelle and Joshua signed the assignment change forms. Kilika says, that should do it. You are both now affiliates of the Zeiss Regional Guild. There are no urgent matters that must be seen to currently. You're free to check the bulletin board and work at your own pace. Estelle says that's kind of disappointing, but hey, a little peace and quiet can be a good thing. Alright, I had a question to ask. Kilika says about Cassius, correct? Estelle says she can read minds. Joshua asks, did Jean tell you about him? Kilika replies, the whole sordid matter. I'm sorry to have to say that Cassius is not currently in the Zeiss region. He only stops in every few months or so. Estelle sighs. Figures. Joshua says, that just leaves Gransel. Or maybe... Kilika says, I believe I might be able to provide you with a lead in another matter. Please, take this. We received an Attention Factory Chief note. Estelle asks, what's this? Kilika says, it's a letter of introduction to the head of the central factory, one Mr. Murdoch. He's basically like the mayor of the Zeiss region. Joshua asks, is this in regards to the matter of the Black Orbment? Killiker says, the stories of the mayor's residence paint it as a very mysterious item. I'd suggest that you continue with the factory chief. I would suggest that you consult with the factory chief and see what he has to say. Estelle says, wow, you've really got this all planned out. Do you have some kind of superpower, Killiker? Killiker replies, my business is to provide support for races such as yourselves. I simply decipher the intelligence that's provided and pass it on, as the mandates of my job require. Estelle says, wow. Joshua says, we really appreciate your assistance. Killiker says, think nothing of it. I trust that you will return to assist us should a major incident occur. Estelle laughs, and count on us when the time comes. Joshua asks, well, do you want to go ahead and see the factory chief? Estelle says, sounds good to me. We have a temp librarian. The client is named Constance. It pays 250 250 mira, and the difficulty is low. I'm seeking an interim librarian with keen investigative skills. Anyone who wishes to apply, please see me in the archives on the second floor. Please understand too that you may be asked to pick up some slack on a few odds and ends before the real work begins. And the Trat Plains Monster. A long term. It is for the Bracers Guild. It pays 1,500 mira and it is medium difficulty. A ferocious monster known as a chronocider A ferocious monster known as a chronocider has been spotted roving the Trat Plains Road. Racers from this branch are requested to deal with this threat immediately. I see. Well, let's head back up the escalators then, and see what this new mayor has to say for himself. Hayes, me love, where do we find the headman? Hazel says, oh, you were the ones with Tita before, no? Welcome to the Central Factory. How can I help you? Estelle says, we are from the Bracers Guild. Joshua says, we'd like to meet with the factory head if we may. Estelle reached into her pouch, paused for dramatic effect, then flourished the introduction note to meet the factory chief. Joshua looked stoic and tried not to roll his eyes. Hazel says, I see. Just a moment, please. Hazel used the intercom, keeping one wary eye on Estelle for all the while. Hazel says, Sir, I'm terribly sorry to bother you during your... Yes, sir, the people from the Bracers Guild are... Yes, sir, right away. Hazel says, thank you for waiting. Factory Chief Murdoch will see you now. His office is upstairs on the second floor. Estelle says, nice. I didn't think he'd see us so quickly. Joshua says, let's not keep him waiting. Second floor, eh? That's the archives. Oh, we had a job in here, didn't we? With the librarian. Estelle says, excuse me, we saw your request on the bulletin board. Constance says, oh my, you're here already? I only just put the request in a little while ago. Estelle laughs. Well, we had just come in to change assignments, so we were ready for work. Constance says, well, shall we get started then? Why not indeed? Estelle says, that's fine. Joshua says, this is about hiring the temp librarian, right? Constance nods. Yes, that's right. It's turned out to be much more of an ordeal than I had expected. Estelle asks, what kind of ordeal? Constance says, I'll explain that in a moment. Beforehand, though, I have a matter that I would like you to help settle. Consider it a favour, if you will. Joshua asks, what kind of matter are you referring to? Constance says the archives loaned out some books to various central factory departments. Sometimes they keep them past the due date and don't pay the fees. First, I'd like you to get our books back. Estelle asks, what? That's simple. Where do we need to go? Constance says, let's see. They should be in the 3rd floor design room and the 4th floor lab and clinic. Estelle says, 3rd floor design room, 4th room lab and clinic. Got it. Is that everything? Constance says, yes. Please come back once you have them. Estelle says, okay, we will. Joshua says, we'll start immediately. Or we will if the lift allows us to. Oh. Dr. Miriam asks, is something the matter? This is the factory clinic. We're equipped for dealing with conventional illnesses too, so don't hesitate to come in. Right, this must be the book here. Found Kitty Talk for Dummies. Okay. I'd ask why that is in this library, but I suspect that I would not get a response. Terry says, recently Ray had me try some kind of vile anti-nap food product sample. It looks like a tomato, but it's terribly bitter. It definitely made me forget any thoughts of sleep. Now I can't get the taste out of my mouth. But that's like calling mousetraps on your earlobes anti-sleep aids. Ray says, this term I was supposed to be studying greenhouses. Do you know what studying greenhouses means? Quite literally, you're watching the grass grow. Boring, and more importantly, unmarketable. So I decided to breed a new species of tomato. It rescued me, so to speak. So, who would like to sample my tomato? No, your guinea pig over here has done more than enough. We found tomorrow's cooking. Okay. Design room, workshop. Design room, wasn't it? Yes. Hugo sighs. This new engine for the Sele is turning into quite a formidable problem. We were waiting for Clive in Ruan to join our in collaborative research, but he declined our offer. And as things currently stand, we're unable to move forward. Igor says that one fella quitting ain't much of a help either. Right now the Sele ain't much more than a gussied up transport ship. We don't do something about finishing it, and all that time and work's wasted. Prometheus says, now where are those papers I set aside before I left? Of course, by before I mean prior to my trip to the Royal Academy, and that was quite a while ago. We found the Septium Optic Annals. I believe that was all. Constance asks, oh, are you done? Estelle laughs. We brought them for you. We handed over the Septium Annals, the Septium Optic Annals. We handed over tomorrow's cooking, and we handed over Kitty Talk for Dummies. All of the books have been returned. And we have completed the Temp Librarian quest. Constance says, good. Now, we have all of the books again. I thank you for your assistance. Estelle laughs. It was no big deal. Joshua says we didn't have any issues. Constance says, that's good to hear. In that case, perhaps I should go ahead and ask you for help with my favourite type of work. Estelle says, oh, that's right. You mentioned having some significant problems somewhere along the line. Joshua asks, so what kind of work is it? Constance replies, just like before, we need some overdue materials returned. The book in question is called The Herby Woodpecker. Joshua says, we'll make a note of that. Estelle nods. Right, Herby Woodpecker. So it's a book on birds, right? Joshua asks, so do you have any clues for us? Constance says, yes, as a matter of fact. Take a look at this. Approach the man of stone standing in silence within the mountain village pond, and ye shall receive. Estelle says, okay, I wrote that down, but what the heck is it? Constance says it was written on a card that was taken from the book. I imagine that it's some kind of hint as to its whereabouts. Estelle says, a hint of bad poetry, maybe? So it was only borrowed because someone with way too much time on their hands wanted to hide it somewhere? Constance says, evidently so. It's the sort of trick that researchers used to play on each other long ago. I have no idea what would possess someone to hide a book of all things. But we certainly have our fair share of unusual characters. It's not surprising that any of them might follow such a bizarre custom. Constance says, anyway, I leave this matter in your capable hands. Please bring the book back. Estelle says, hey, hang on a second. Is this the only lead we have? Constance says, I'm afraid so. But the guild sent you, so I have every confidence in your abilities. Estelle sighs. Well, that's just awesome. Joshua says, understood. It will be difficult work, but we will do all that we can. Constance says, you may have to search every nook and cranny in Zeiss, but I'm sure you'll find it. I'll be waiting here. When you do find it, please bring it back to me. Estelle sighs. Let's get this show on the road then. Constance laughs. I look forward to seeing you again. Factory Chief Murdoch says, hey, I've been waiting for you two. Estelle and Joshua, right? Estelle says, yes, it's nice to meet you, sir. Joshua says, we're sorry to bother you at work like this. Factory Chief Murdoch says, no, don't worry yourselves about that. The Bracers Guild, and Cassius in particular, have done a great deal for me in the past. It would be rude of me not to welcome his children. Estelle says, huh? You know Dad? Factory Chief Murdoch says, I guess you might say that. He was my benefactor. It's no exaggeration to say that the central factory produces the finest ornaments in the land. Naturally, the confrontations over our craft have never really stopped. Whenever we had a problem, we'd always contact the Ruan branch and have him come over. Estelle says, I see. Joshua says, that explains all the business trips then. Factory Chief Murdoch says, And now my benefactor's kids come to visit me themselves. So what can I do for you? I'm happy to help. Estelle laughs. Thanks, sir. Joshua says it's kind of a long story. Joshua and Estelle explain to Murdoch about the events surrounding the mysterious black orbment. Factory Chief Murdoch says, I see. Well then, would you mind if I had a look at this orbment? Estelle says, sure, no problem. Estelle produced the black orbment and handed it to the Factory Chief. Factory Chief Murdoch says, now this certainly is an oddity. It's obviously made from modern materials, but the caliber isn't inscribed anywhere. Estelle asks, caliber? Joshua asks, you mean the numbers that are carved into the orbment's frame? Factory Chief Murdoch nods. Exactly. It's almost unheard of for an orbment to be produced without them. That's not just in Liberl either. Most other nations on the continent are the same way. It's been a tradition dating back to when the orbments were first invented 50 years ago. Estelle says, you don't say. Estelle took out her combat orbment and eyeballed it suspiciously. Estelle says, you're right. There are numbers right there. Crazy. Joshua sighs. You mean to say that you've never noticed in all this time? Estelle frowns. Oh, you hush. But seriously, is it really that strange for one to have no caliber on it? Factory Chief Murdoch says it's pretty much a part of the production process, and that goes for any Orbital factory. It's as if this one were a prototype or something. If so, I'd imagine it wasn't made to entertain at birthday parties, if you take my meaning. Estelle says, so less with the sweet and awesome, more with the stabby hurty. Got it. Factory Chief Murdoch says, of course, I can't say for certain without looking inside. Joshua asks, what is it? Factory Chief Murdoch says, I can't find the maintenance cover. And now that I really look at it, it has no seams to it at all. How the hell was this thing made? I don't see any way to check out the inside of it. Estelle says, oh man, would it be possible to cut it open? Factory Chief Murdoch says, that might work, yes, but I'd hate to just break something belonging to Cassius like that. Estelle says, oh, okay. Joshua says, maybe we should let that professor handle it. Estelle says, oh right, the one mentioned in the note. Yeah, he should be able to tell us something. There was a note that was included with the orbment. Estelle showed Murdoch the note that was in the package for Cassius. Factory Chief Murdoch reads, please ask Professor R to do an analysis. Joshua asks, you wouldn't happen to know who this Professor R is, would you? Factory Chief Murdoch says, well, let me think. From the letter R and the people that Cassius knew, it must be Professor Russell. Joshua says, I thought so. Estelle asks, who's Professor Russell? And wait a second, how do you know this guy? Joshua says, I don't, but I know of him. He's known as the person who brought Orbital technology to Liberl in the first place. Factory Chief Murdoch says, hey, you know your stuff. As I'm sure you know, orbments were invented by Professor Epstein, and Professor Russell was one of his disciples. 40 years ago, he brought the orbments and his knowledge back, and that's why Liberl is a technologically advanced nation. You might say that he was the father of the Orbital Revolution. Estelle says, wow, now that is impressive. Man, I had no idea that Dad knew anyone like that. Factory Chief Murdoch says, even so, it worries me a little that you'll be letting the Orbital handle this orbment. We have no idea what it is, really. Estelle says, huh? Factory Chief Murdoch says, well, how to put this? For good or for ill, he is a certified genius. When he gets an idea for a new invention in his head, there's just no telling what he'll do. Much like the time when he was developing the first orbital airship. Estelle whispers, what's with the far-off look? Joshua whispers back, I guess that a lot has happened. Chief Murdoch clears his throat. Sorry. I'm sure that he'll be able to figure this thing out. Go find him and ask him about it. Not hurt. Estelle says, thanks, Chief. Joshua asks, where should we go to find him? Factory Chief Murdoch says, hold on a moment. Murdoch flipped the switch on the intercom. Testing. Ah, good. Actually, I've been looking for you. Sorry to bother you, but can you come here? All right, I'll be waiting. Estelle asks, what, did you just call the professor or something? Factory Chief Murdoch says, oh, no. He actually has a private workshop in town. He has all the latest technology at his disposal, so I know he can figure out something about that thing. Estelle says, wow, he really must be a genius. Wait, then who did you call? Factory Chief Murdoch says, his granddaughter. She works here at the factory. I'm sure the child will be happy to show you the way. Estelle asks, the child? A girl's voice says, excuse me. Estelle gasps, what? Joshua says, you. Tita says, oh, Estelle and Joshua. Factory Chief Murdoch asks, you mean that you know each other? Estelle says, yeah, we only just met a little while ago though. Joshua asks, so then, I guess that she is the professor's daughter? Granddaughter? Factory Chief Murdoch says, exactly. Tita, I've been talking with Estelle and Joshua here. I'd like for you to show them the way to your house. Tita says, to see Grandpa? Okay, I will. Factory Chief Murdoch says, I appreciate it. Ah, yes, if you learn anything new, I'd love it if you came back and told me. As an engineer, I'm extremely curious to know more about this. Estelle laughs. Sure thing. Joshua says, if you'll excuse us then. Estelle says, hey, I didn't think you'd be coming. And you're even the granddaughter of the famous professor. Joshua says, it's no wonder that you're so comfortable with orbments. Tita laughs. Oh, come on. I'm still just studying under my grandpa. Oh, by the way, do you braces have business with my grandpa? Estelle says, well, sort of. The situation is kind of complicated. Joshua says, we can explain everything once we see your grandfather. Tita says, oh, okay. My house is in the southwest corner of town. Get off the escalator and go straight until you reach the south entrance. Then turn to the west and there it is. Estelle says, got it. Well, let's get moving. Indeed. Let's head back to the ground floor. Let's see if we can expand Tita's orbment. Oh dear. Yes, we can open that one. And we can just afford to open that one. Lucky us. Okay, so a space quartz only. Well, we don't appear to have a space quartz. And I'm going to put HP2 in there to make her a little bit more survivable. So we need a space quartz, which is the yellow ones. EP cut 2 for her. She already has an EP cut 2 and a move 2. Should have paid more attention. Anyway, we can't do any more. Turn, that's east. West is this one. Possibly. Uriel says, "Hi, Tita." Tita says, "Uriel, finished with school?" Uriel says, "Don't be silly, Tita. Sunday school isn't today." Tita says, "Oh, it wasn't?" Uriel says, "Tita dear, you need to rest. And come to school sometime too. Everybody wants to see you again." Tita says, "Okay, I've just been real busy lately. I'll come back as soon as I can." Uriel says, "That's a promise, right?" Louise says, "Hold on. Tita, what are you doing here?" Tita says, "Louise, aren't you supposed to be working in the design room?" Louise says, "Yeah, but first they wanted me to finish calibrating the orbal guns. Are you showing these two braces the ropes or something?" Tita says, "Yes, I am. We're on our way back to my house now." Louise says, "Speaking of your house, Tita, it sure has been quiet around there as of late. No gas leaks or explosions." Estelle whispers, "Explosions?" Tita says, "I wouldn't go so far as to say explosions, Louise. Just a little flying glass." Estelle says, "Just a little flying glass?" Joshua says, "How exciting?" Louise says, "Whatever. I want to see the professor's newest inventions as much as anyone. Don't stop your test due to worries about collateral damage." Tita says, "Okay. Thank you. Good luck on the production of the new orbal guns." Louise says, "Many thanks. Nose to the old grindstone and all that." Okay. Tita laughs. "This is my house." Estelle says, "Wow, nice place." Joshua asks, "Professor Russell is here?" Tita says, "No, I think he's in the workshop. Through this door." Estelle says, "We should go and say hi then." I mean, it doesn't look like anyone's here. Can we push some buttons? Oh, okay, he's up here. Tita says, "I'm home, Grandpa." Professor Russell says, "Grrr." Okay, maybe this way. Ah! Tita says, Estelle asks, so this is the professor? Estelle says, Nice to meet you. My name is Estelle Bright of the Braces Guild. We actually came to get your expert opinion on, Professor Russell shouts, Got it! Estelle screams. Professor Russell laughs. I did it. It's finally complete. That's right. Who's the man? I'm the man. Yes, I should start testing it at once. Estelle says, Whoa. What the hell? Tita says, I'm sorry, Estelle. Grandpa kind of goes into a trance when he's working, and he doesn't really notice what's going on around him. I think he just finished up the device he's been working on for the past few days. Joshua says, I see. He really is something. Estelle says, Oh, he's something, all right. Tita says, I'm so embarrassed. Tita says, Grandpa, there are some people here who need to talk to you. Professor Russell says, Oh, Tita, you've come at just the right time. I need your help with compiling the data from these tests. Tita says, but Grandpa... Professor Russell says this new invention will actually block a biosensor Orbment's detection faculties. It emits a unique orbital force field that deflects the energy that a biosensor sends out when it scans. Tita asks, Oh, really? Professor Russell says, Yes, really. Since when do I overstate my own accomplishments? Now come on, we've got testing to do. Tita nods. Right. Professor Russell and Tita began working with some complex-looking equipment. Estelle pouts. Hey now. Joshua says, Never mind, Estelle. I think we should just let them be for a little while. Professor Russell says, Hey, you with the black hair. Joshua asks, Who, me? Professor Russell asks, Who else? On the upstairs bookcase is a notebook entitled Orbital Energy as Applied to Force Fields. Go get it. Go on, be quick about it. Joshua says, All right. And runs off to get it. Estelle calls, Wait, Joshua. Professor Russell says, Hey, young lady, you with the antenna hair. Estelle frowns. Antenna? Oh, no, you didn't. Professor Russell says, Quit farting around and make some coffee. Estelle asks, Why should I have to make you coffee? Professor Russell says, I take it black, by the way. I want it clear as mud. Estelle groans. You're not hearing a word I say. Fine. Whatever. And off she runs. Tita says, Yep, perfect. All set, Grandpa. Professor Russell says, Just as fast as ever. Tita says, Oh. Where are Estelle and Joshua? Professor Russell asks, Who? Come to think of it, I do vaguely recall a couple of young folks. Murdoch sent along some fresh faces then, I presume. Tita blushes. Grandpa. And so, Estelle and Joshua inadvertently wound up as assistants in the experiment. After many small but relatively harmless explosions and some singeing of the eyebrows, the day gave way to evening. Professor Russell laughs. Sorry about all that. I just assumed you were both new employees at the central factory. So it's only natural that you wound up being drafted as assistants. Estelle groans. This is no laughing matter. Especially since the only thing you had me helping with was making coffee. Girls can bang metal parts together too, you old man. Joshua says, Relax, Estelle. We got some valuable experience out of the deal in the end. How often does one get to participate in startup tests on a brand new type of Orbment after all? Professor Russell says, well now, you're a bright lad then, aren't you? Want to give up this brace of nonsense and start up in the field of orbital engineering? Tita says, Grandpa, I'm really sorry guys. I guess I got caught up in the moment too. Estelle says, you don't need to apologize, sweetie, but I thought the father of the orbital revolution was going to be some really amazing man, not some old fart with attention deficit issues. Professor Russell laughs. Please, you're too kind. Moving on, so I'm being paid a visit by the children of Cassius. That's quite the surprise. Estelle asks, so you really do know our dad? Professor Russell nods. Yes, from way back when. I've known him since his army days, some 20 years or so. Tita says, I've met him too. He had the really nice moustache, right? Estelle says, well, I don't know if I'd call it nice as much as suspicious looking. But if he's known Dad for that long, it looks like we'll be safe in trusting you-know-what with Professor Russell after all. Joshua says, yes, I have to agree. Professor Russell asks, what are you talking about? And what was it you wanted my help with? Estelle says, well, Estelle explained to the professor the whole sequence of events surrounding the Black Orbment. Professor Russell says, I see. Tita says, wow, a pitch black Orbment. Professor Russell says, yes, most intriguing, and with no inscribed caliber or seams. Look at that frame too. Professor Russell produced a cutting tool from his belt. Without a word, he pushed the blade's edge against the outer shell of the Orbment. Estelle asks, wait, what are you doing? Joshua says, it's a special alloy steel cutter. Professor Russell says, just as I thought. Here, take a look. Estelle says, okay. Estelle, Joshua and Tita peer intently at the Black Orbment. Estelle says, huh? Tita says, there's not even a scratch. Professor Russell says, the frame is made from some type of metal that I've never before encountered. Opening it up for a closer look is going to be quite the task, I think. Estelle says, that's just crazy. Joshua says, if we can't find some way to open it, we'll be right back to square one. Professor Russell says, well, I can certainly spend some time on trying, but first I think that maybe we should put it under a measurement scan. Estelle asks, a what now? Tita says, that huge piece of equipment you saw when we were working on the experiment. It can gauge orbital energy activity in real time. Estelle says, you're making my head hurt with your techno-babble. Just tell me what using that thing will accomplish. Professor Russell says, to put it in layman's terms, it'll allow us to see just what this Orbment does. We won't be able to draw any definitive conclusions just from measuring what kind of orbital activity is occurring, but it's a start. Joshua says, and that should give us a major clue. Professor Russell says, indeed. So, without further ado, Tita says, Grandpa, shouldn't we have lunch first? Professor Russell says, sure. Tita says, Estelle and Joshua, you're both welcome to join us. I can't promise it'll be anything special, but Estelle says, sounds great to me. Joshua says, we'll even help with prep. Professor Russell says, alright, come on then. I've got a bit to do while lunch is prepared. Tita says, no, I want to see it too. No fair working when I'm not around. Professor Russell says, my house, my rules. Estelle whispers, what is up with these two? Joshua whispers, now I see where she gets it. Professor Russell clears his throat. Now, if everyone is ready, let's get this started. Estelle, if you'll put the orbment on the stand. Estelle says, okay. Like this? Professor Russell says, yes, thank you. Are you ready, Tita? Tita says, all set. Professor Russell says, good. Now commencing orbital force measurement test on the black orbment. Joshua says, black orbment, so that's going to be the official name after all. Estelle says, but using it officially is so boring and simple. Why not something cool like dark thingy of impending doom? Professor Russell says, no, simple is best. Anything longer than black orbment would just be annoying to say. Tita fidgets. Estelle says, oh, look at her, she's all anxious to start. Tita says, huh? Oh, and starts laughing. Professor Russell says, all right, let's begin. Tita, if you'll activate the scanner, please. Tita nods. Okay. Professor Russell says, output set at 45. Put all measuring equipment on standby. Tita says, roger. Done. All measuring equipment is calibrated. Professor Russell says, okay, from here on out is the real deal. Since no direct input or output was detected, all we can do is measure how the central crystal circuit responds. Now, let's see just how much this contraption is really worth. Estelle says, you're sure in a good mood. Professor Russell says, and click. Estelle says, neat, it's all glowing and stuff. Joshua says, I get it, it's putting a major strain on the crystal circuit. Professor Russell says, there. Tita, any readings? Tita says, yes, but they're kind of weird. Professor Russell says, Tita says, the tachometer needle's shaking like crazy. Now it's spinning around the dial. Professor Russell asks, what? Tita screams. Professor Russell asks, what's going on here? Estelle cries, Joshua. Joshua says, it's that same black light from before. Professor Russell says, what? Tita cries, Grandpa, it won't take much more of this. We have to shut it down. Professor Russell says, don't you dare. Just a little longer and we'll have something. Estelle cries, wait a second. All the lights in town are going out. Tita says, huh? Professor Russell says, what in? We have no choice then. Terminating the experiment. Estelle says, oh, they're back on. Tita says, phew. Professor Russell says, let's see the readout. Nothing. It didn't record anything, and the only thing that kept working was the scanner in which the black Orbment sat, but even that, well, as for everything else... Joshua says, "Good, it looks like the experiment's finished." Estelle asks, How's it outside? Joshua says, "Fine, all the lights are back like nothing happened. There's still a lot of people panicking though." Estelle says, "Okay, but just what the hell was all that?" Professor Russell says that was what I would dub the orbital shutdown phenomenon. Estelle asks, "The what down?" Joshua says, "You mean how everything inside all the orbments just stopped working at once?" Tita asks, "So the black Orbment did this?" Professor Russell says, "Yes, I've no doubt. But I would never have dared to guess that its effect would be so extensive. There's definitely more to this than I expected. Interesting. Most interesting indeed." Estelle says, "Only you would think causing a blackout over an entire city was interesting." A man's voice cries, "Professor!" Professor Russell says, "Ah, Murdoch, just the man I wanted to see." Factory Chief Murdoch says, "The feeling is not mutual. Every single time you invent something, it means trouble for me. What the hell were you up to that would cause all of the power downtown to go out?" Professor Russell says, "How rude. It's not even my fault this time. See that there? That's the black Orbment, and it caused this." Factory Chief Murdoch says, "Is that the... Okay, I get it. If that's the root of this, then it's genuine extenuating circumstances. But it still means that this was your fault." Professor Russell says, "Ah, nuts, you got me." Estelle asks, "That's it? They're just okay again?" Joshua asks, "Are they always like this?" Tita says, "This is so embarrassing." And so the first day in Zeiss kept everyone busy. Due to how late it was, Estelle and Joshua stayed at the lab for the night. Estelle says, "Man, yesterday was such a crazy day. I was surprised enough at the town, but I really wasn't expecting to deal with anything like that." Joshua laughs. "No kidding. But back on the subject of the black Orbment, it's much more powerful than I'd ever imagined possible." Estelle nods. "Yeah. What's the prof gonna do now that his equipment's gone all kaflooey?" Tita calls, "Good morning, guys." Estelle says, "Good morning, Tito." Joshua says, "Good morning. Quite a big day yesterday." Tita laughs. "No kidding. Did you guys sleep okay?" Estelle nods. "Yep, like babies. Is the professor already up?" Tita says, "Oh, he left for the central factory early this morning. He said something about how he was going to expose all the black Orbment's secrets." Estelle says, "Wow, looks like getting roared at over and over by the factory chief yesterday didn't even put a dent in him." Joshua says, "We really appreciate both of you taking the time just to look over something a couple of relative strangers brought you." Tita says, "Oh, it's fine, really. Grandpa's investigating it out of pure curiosity more than anything. I should go to the factory myself once I'm done with breakfast. What do you plan to do?" Estelle says, "Naturally, we'll be coming with you. I want to know what's really going on with that Orbment too." Joshua says, "Maybe there's something we can do to help." Tita cries, "Yay, then you can come with me." "Uh-oh, I almost forgot the soup." Just a second, you two. I'll bring you breakfast as soon as I make sure it's edible and not on fire. And she runs off. Estelle says, I guess that's what the smell is, but man, what a cutie. I wish we could take her back with us to relent. She could be like a pet, cheering us up whenever we're feeling down. Joshua says, that's kind of creepy, Estelle. And we're back outside now. Estelle says, and now that we've had a good breakfast, off to the central factory. Joshua says, before we do that, I'd like to check in at the guild. I think it might be best to report on what happened yesterday, just to be on the safe side. Estelle says, well, okay. Hey Tita, do you mind if we stop by there on the way? Tita says, sure, go ahead. Kilika says, good morning. That was some day yesterday, wasn't it? When you're ready, we'd like your full report on it. Estelle says, business as usual, Kilika? Kilika says, I've heard the basics from the factory chief already, but I'd like to expand that account with some first-hand details. Joshua says, well... Joshua explained the details of the Orbital blackout. Kilika says, I see. So the Orbment that was sent to Cassius in secret was in fact something dangerous. The Guild is very interested in these developments. We need to continue working with Professor Russell for the present. Estelle says, we thought you'd say that. Joshua says, when we have more information, we'll contact you immediately. Alright. Well, before we go visit Grandad, we will call an end to the episode here and give my voice a rest. So if you've made it this far, thank you very much for watching. We hope you have a wonderful day and we will see you in the next episode.